So what's happening in Syria, it's groundbreaking. A lot of changes are coming, and what happens, it's going to shape the future of the Middle East.
On December 8th marked the downfall of Assad. What happened was, as we all know by now, HTS launched an offensive against the Assad regime. They took over Idlib first, Aleppo, Hama,
Okay.
Damascus, then Homs. They wanted the plan was to take Homs first. However, it was rumored that the forces were too strong in Homs, so they took an alternative to Damascus first.
Mm.
Once they conquered Damascus, within a few hours later, Homs was declared free of the regime as well. And on that day, Assad was no longer in power.
So HTS, who is HTS? Who's their leader?
HTS, their leader is Muhammad al-Jalani. However, that is an alias he used under the
Mm.
regime, so it's harder to track him
Yeah.
and things like that. His real name, as we know now, is Ahmad al-Shara.
Al-Shara.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you see the videos out of Sidnaya prison under the regime?
Yeah. So I'm glad you mentioned that because that was one of those things. I didn't really know about the prison.
No, I don't think a
Yeah,
lot of people knew, bro.
obviously it was kept under dark. I knew about a lot of the. I remember like watching in I think it was 2013 when he did the chemical attacks
Yeah.
in Aleppo, I believe, and I remember when the initial war happened, started civil war around 2011, and so I knew like there was a lot of oppression going on from Assad, but whatever, he's almost dead.
Bashar al-Khara.
Yeah. So I knew there was a lot of oppression, but I was shocked at the numbers. Like, people were reporting at the prison once HTS took over. And it was crazy, man. The torture devices that they had. You seen that
Yeah.
human press?
Yeah, so they had the human press. Did you see the gauntlet with the thing where like you hang yourself like this and the blade comes down on your neck?
So like the guillotine.
Yeah, the guillotine. That's what.
No,
Yeah, yeah.
no, I didn't see
They
that.
have that. They did them in acid as well.
The guillotine seems like the least painful thing that they did, like that they
I
had,
believe so
besides
too.
like just shooting them in the head or
Right.
something. But you know what? All that, the amount of bodies and the mass graves was insane. And I was reading on that one NGO, non-government organization. It was saying that they estimate like 100,000 like graves, bodies in this mass grave. That's a lot of numbers.
A lot.
And they initially had it at 6 feet, but there was problems with animals and they needed to hide it. So they ended up making this particular grave. There's obviously more throughout the region. This particular one, they ended up making it 25 feet deep.
Wow.
So, you can imagine just how many more bodies you could kind of pile on. And they had a system too of like getting rid of, you go to prison, you kill them, they throw them in the mass
Right.
graves. So there's a lot of stuff that the world didn't really know about. It just kept kind of under the radar until obviously HTS liberated Syria.
In the prison, I don't know if you saw the video of when the HTS guards broke out the men. They were all in shock. They thought it was time for them to be executed.
Yeah.
And on that day when they broke them out, 54 men were being saved from execution. And they were all like ready to die. They thought it was time to die. But
They-
the rebels were like, come on, come on. It's time to get out. It's time to get out. Suria's free. Us is no longer here. And they were all in shock. And when they opened the women's, like a bunch of women came out. They thought they
Yeah.
were about to be R-worded, right? But there's an Al
Astaghfirullah.
Jazeera clip
Yeah.
of like a little boy coming out.
Yeah, I seen that.
He's like 4 years old and he's never seen daylight, bro.
Yeah, subhanAllah. So it's interesting. How is HTS dealing with non-Muslims such as Christians, any other sect or denomination?
HTS, I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
HTS, then Saturday night, they went, I believe it was the 8th of December.
Mm-hmm.
They went to the Christian Valley. It's a countryside in Homs.
Yeah.
And a bunch of them rolled up in their cars and they got out of the cars and all the Christians are coming out like, what can we help you with?
Yeah.
Like, and the leader, whoever was on part of that envoy,
Yeah.
they're like, we want to talk to your pope or the high-ranking person in the
Yeah.
church. And they were like, okay. So they all took him there, and they straight up told the pope, they were like, Syria is free from Assad now. Tomorrow is Sunday. Go to church like you guys normally would. There's no threat. We're not here to harm you. Our intention is to do nothing. They want to live in peace together. And the only thing they said was, we're gonna come back tomorrow morning just to take videos and pictures
Yeah.
to show the world that we're
For the
not
gram.
harming you.
For the
Yeah.
gram. Yeah. It's yeah, what HTS, I know there was a lot of concern, and we'll kind of touch in on it a little later of how HTS or what is like who makes up HTS, but it seems like they're really trying to do things differently. Trying to, I wouldn't say by the books because there isn't really a definite by the books, but trying to actually restart the country. They're trying to, hey, like stop all the
They're doing it conservatively. They don't want any problems to get in the way.
yeah,
They
yeah,
don't want war to get in the way. They
yeah,
don't want sanctions to get in the way. They don't want the
infighting of religion,
right.
which really hasn't been a problem with the Christians and Syrians, at least with HTS for the most part.
With Sidnaya prison,
Yeah,
there's another prison I believe under it called the Red Prison,
yeah.
and the locks are very complicated. I don't know if they were even able to get in yet or not.
I know Turkey.
And there's a bunch of other prisons throughout the country that are underground,
yeah,
and people aren't able to locate. So by now, I'm assuming people have died
yeah.
because of they weren't able to locate them, and they don't even know where they are. Because if he had
Underground Railroad.
right,
Yeah,
imagine how many prisons he could have built underneath
that's crazy.
and killed people like that, and that would have been all under the radar.
Yeah.
Only he knows where the tunnels lead to what.
Yeah.
The rebels and everyone involved doesn't know where they are, so they weren't able to save people on time, most likely. And I saw another video recently it was a different prison. It wasn't Sidnaya, but they went in and started recording the prison, and there was solitary confinement.
Mm.
They said that 6 people were in one confinement at one time, at all times.
That's insane.
And there was like a prison room, and normally one prisoner will be in there. It's a
Mhm.
bigger room, but they put like 50, 40 people in there at once. And there was one solitary confinement where if it was painted black on the inside, that means you're in there for life. So they painted it black for psychological torture as well.
Do they? Oh, go on.
So they were doing physical torture and psychological.
So do they like get like an hour of free time? Probably not.
No.
That's rough. That's like stuff you hear about like when they teach you about like slavery ships. Not comparing, but like that's what it kind of reminds me of, or like even the concentration camps in World War II. It's that type of level of torture, and it's just continuing that negativity, I guess.
Right. And there was another cell. If it's painted red, that means you're about to die soon. That's like execution. Like
Yeah.
you're about to be
That's
executed
probably
by the regime.
least bad one in the
Right.
entire situation. So Syria, there's a lot of players in Syria actively. Like it's a crowded battle space. It's a crowded environment. And we're gonna dive into some of these players. I want to start off with the QSD or the SDF, Syrian Defense Force. This is it's a predominantly Kurdish-backed force that is backed by NATO and the U.S., mainly Western countries, not really Turkey, even though Turkey is in NATO.
The Kurds, they're a minority in Syria, right?
Yeah, so they are a minority, and the territory they hold is in the northeast. And a lot of the times they are engaging Turkey, like Turkey militia groups and Turkey. They're fighting against Turkey-backed groups as well, and they're also fighting against other terrorist groups like ISIS. So there's small pockets of ISIS in south central Syria. That's where most of their activity. It's really just these random groups are just guys willing to blow themselves up. Like honestly, that's how I see it. Like obviously ISIS, it has a stronger presence in um and it's ISIL or Daesh because they declare themselves a caliphate. It's like something weird, but they have a stronger presence in Africa, but there's still remnants, like random pockets, hotspots of these dudes popping up. So you have the Kurds, the SDF. You have
I saw recently Erdogan gave the Kurds a warning. He was like, "Stop the fighting, or basically you're gonna die. Like you're gonna be eliminated."
so it's interesting because they have like one of their party leaders. He's exiled on an island in Turkey, so he's like under Turkey, like he house arrest by
Uh huh.
Turkey. And they allowed the some leadership from the Kurds to meet him in a way to like broker peace.
Uh huh.
So there is movement towards the Kurds and Turkey maybe fighting less or like having a ceasefire. And this is a lot of it like because of what HTS is doing. So like, these players in the region, they're kind of feeding off each other, going towards one direction. And HTS is really taking the lead and trying to stabilize the region. And then you have the Syrian National Army, and there's so many national armies in Syria. Like there's these all these forces, but the Syrian National Army, it's Turkish backed group. Think of it essentially, ignore the name, think of it as a paramilitary group funded by Turkey. And it really they created that in response to beef up border security, but they hold territory in Syria closer to Turkey's border.
Turkey has a buffer zone
Yeah.
in Syria.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Syrian National Army are the guys holding that buffer zone, and these guys also aided HTS, Hayat al-Asham, right? And so now it comes to HTS, the forefronters or the forerunners in this liberation. So there are old remnants of the Al Qaeda that was in Syria. So they brokered off years ago. They do they basically did a rebrand and they PR themselves for the 2024. And it's funny because you see a lot of these pictures online of like HTS fighters just standing security and like random chicks or dudes just like taking selfies. Like they're
Yeah.
out there. I've seen them. Like I saw one for Christmas. It was like this HTS dude holding security, and it was like a couple people with Santa hats and stuff, like taking selfies. So they kind of rebranded themselves. They broke off from Al Qaeda. There's members of ISIS, but everybody hated ISIS. Like ISIS was that one thing in the Middle East.
It was the common enemy in the Middle
Yeah,
East.
it united the Middle East. Like everybody hates ISIS, and ISIS has killed more Muslims than any other thing, even more than Western forces, right? So this infighting with Muslims, we tend to ignore it as Western Muslims a lot of the time, just because it's an internal food. You
Hmm.
keep it in house type of thing. But ISIS is one of those things where they killed more Muslims than Christians than Jewish. Right. So it's a good reason to hate ISIS.
Right. And I want to be clear during this episode, we don't officially endorse HTS. We're just observing from the outside of
Yeah.
what they've done. All the different militas in Syria recently united. Did you see that under one form of government except the
Yeah.
Kurds?
Yeah. And there's talks for that, or like
The
a
Kurds joining them?
non-aggression pact, a peace agreement, something along those lines. But HTS is like, so I want to be clear. HTS basically right now they're more on the diplomatic end, but before this run, HTS was a thing. They were alive. They were really dealing with a lot of these mini militia groups. There's a whole bunch of them. They were either engaging them in combat, like actively taking them out, and hey, join us, right? Be with us. We won't mess with you. Or they were, taking out their leadership, or just having diplomatic talks. So they actually have been more pro like negotiations, and I could believe that, and I know it's something new every day that they're peace agreements or peace talks. They're talking to regional powers, right?
Yeah, recently they went to go talk to Saudi.
Their defense minister, I believe, yeah.
Yes.
Which Saudi, I don't like them. No comment, no comment. And so Hezbollah is another player in Syria as well. Now, in
The shit done.
they took halftime. They didn't actively participate in anything. If they would have been attacking. They would have been fighting HTS because in 2011, 2013, Hezbollah supported Bashar al-Assad against the rebels, against the whatever you want to label them. And Bashar himself, both of them are funded by Iran.
Iran.
Yep, the shaitan in the Middle East, boy. So, is naturally they would support Bashar. They would support him against the rebels, but they're really weakened with this. With Israel, Israel's like putting a hamper on them, and that pager attack, it took out a chunk of their leadership. Hezbollah is not just a random group of dudes in pajamas running around in the Middle East. They have a political wing that's active in the government of Lebanon. And I believe, I haven't really dug too much into it, but the Lebanese people naturally support Hezbollah because Hezbollah fought off Israel when Israel did its incursion in one of the times Israel did its incursion out of the many into Lebanon. So they have a military wing, they have a political wing. So it's kind of like a legit government force in Lebanon. But they obviously kind of support the bigger Iran narrative.
And that's one of the reasons why HTS was able to do a quick offensive against the regime
Yeah.
and become so. It was just a swift takeover. I think it took like 10 days
Yeah.
because the Hezbollah forces in Syria, they were all called back to go back to Lebanon and help the fight against Israel.
Yep.
So they fled Syria and went there. And really all HTS's main component was the regime. And even the regime fighters, they don't have anything to fight for. What are they
Yeah.
fighting for? They lost motivation. They can't feed their families. They can't do anything. It's like, what's the motivation anymore? Why
Yeah.
am I supporting this guy? Some of them were practically even surrendering and just letting HTS do whatever they want.
Yeah.
And recently I saw HTS gave, so the only citizens that really have guns right now in Syria, if I'm not mistaken, are the people of the old regime. And they gave them a day in time
To turn it in.
to turn everything
Yeah.
in. And a lot of them did.
Yeah,
And they
I've
were
seen that.
interviewed saying like, why'd you do what you did? And a lot of them were like, we were practically forced to because there's a law in Syria. Once you turn 18, you have to go join the
Yeah.
army and you're under
Mandatory
Assad.
service. Yeah.
You do what he tells you to do. This guy said, I know what I was doing was wrong under the regime. He didn't support the regime, but some of them had no choice to because
Yeah.
Assad is the modern tyrant and pharaoh of our times.
Yeah, definitely. And Russia is distracted too with they got bigger fish to fry. And so in 2011, 2013, they actively did strikes in Aleppo and all over Syria.
They did a little bit this time around too when HTS was fighting,
Yeah.
but not
During the early
nearly.
days. And then they backed off. They do have a naval base in, I don't remember the city, on the West Coast, on the Med. They have two naval bases. One is a big one for their fleet in the Mediterranean. I think Russia will stay in Syria. They definitely, it's kind of like a neutral end. Like, I believe HTS knows they supported Assad, but at the same time, having Russia isn't really a bad thing now that their main focus is Ukraine, this whole Ukraine thing. So they're not really going to try to take an active role in Syria unless things change, But Russia is actively, that's another player that was there that was supporting the regime. US was another player, kind of small. The main US troops, they were there during the ISIS thing, the ISIS debacle, whatever you want to call that. So they put a hamper on them. There's a small presence, but they're not like a player in the region. It's just saying, hey, we're America, we're here.
Russia, if they want the bases there, I think HTS should use that against, like, for negotiation. Be like, hey, if you want these bases to stay here, hand over Assad, give Assad back to us,
Yeah,
and then
bro.
you can keep those two bases there.
I said that, bro.
I know you did.
Bro, taking my lots right now. Yeah, I don't see. I see Russia, like Russia's notorious for people falling off high buildings, basically
Or they might
assassination.
kill him.
Yeah,
Because, he did bring $30 billion with him and a bunch of gold.
Russia needs that, bro.
Putin
That's
Putin doesn't care about him. He doesn't have any.
he's no
He has
leverage.
no leverage.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
he doesn't have anything to
HTS.
offer Putin anymore. So they might just off
Yeah,
him and take what he brought with him to Moscow.
HTS basically successfully took over the country.
Yes.
There's small things happening here and there, but they are the main players. They are predominant. They're patrolling the streets. They're, on that diplomatic side. Jelani, he got dripped.
He
Mohammed
does.
al-Jelani.
You
Yeah.
saw his suits and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I bet nice quality suits.
And I like his answers that he's been giving in the interview.
Yeah, he has like they rebranded. They got a whole PR thing. Obviously, the main benefactor of this whole thing is Turkey. So like
Yes.
Turkey is a more up and coming player in
They're the most up and coming player in
In
Syria right
Syria.
now. They have all the ties. I mean, HCS is basically, they have no decision but to go with Turkey on this one because I believe Turkey backs HTS
yeah. I don't think they
during the whole offensive that they launched.
yeah,
Yeah.
and the Syrian National Army, which is
I
Turkey's.
think Turkey denied the claim that they backed them.
Yeah, they did
But
not.
I think they did behind the scenes, of course. But
They're the main benefactor.
and Turkey really helped the refugees of Syria when they fled during the regime.
Yeah,
They took, I think it was more than 2 million
that's a
refugees.
lot.
And Erdogan's opponents tried to use that against him
Yeah.
during election seasons and everything. But Erdogan stood firm.
I remember like a lot of people in Turkey were like these refugees gotta go
Right.
because it was having like a economical effect, a negative effect. I'm sure it raised like inflation or something, but yeah, Turkey definitely took in a lot. But now, did you see the video of everybody flooding back into Syria?
It's a lot.
Yeah,
Did you see? I
the
saw that
highway
on
was shut
TRT
down,
World.
bro.
Yeah.
The highway was shut
They
down.
took like drone footage beyond the eye can see. It's just brake lights
Yeah.
of people trying to in line going back to the country.
Do you see Western Muslims, Syrian Muslims, going back to Syria?
I believe so. I know at some point I want to,
Mm-hmm.
but I do want to wait a little bit to see what happens.
Yeah.
It's interesting you brought that up. I recently saw a clip of this guy celebrating New Year's in Syria. Middle East Eye interviewed him, and one of the questions they asked him was, "What's your message to the people that fled the country because of the regime?" And his response was basically, "It's safe. We have nothing to fear anymore.
Yeah.
You guys should all come back, especially if you're students, doctors, engineers, and everything." Because he said it's time to rebuild the country that we want back. And basically telling them to come back, give a helping hand
Yeah.
to rebuild the country.
It seems like a lot of people want to do that. Syria definitely kind of gave hope in the Middle East or in Syria that hey, things can get better. Like
Right.
tyrants can fall.
Right.
Right. So
Sisi, you're next.
he's Egypt dude, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, him and then Jordan, because they low key like the
Yeah.
population. That's another.
After Syria was liberated,
Yeah,
Egypt had problems. Like people were trying to fight against the government. I
Yeah.
saw one clip though.
yeah.
I don't think it lasted long, but I saw
just a
little
random
clips.
protest.
Right.
Yeah.
But at some point, I know I want to go back to Syria. I've been there maybe 2 times, 3 times when I was a lot younger. I have some core memories. I don't remember everything. Like I remember my grandma's apartment.
Yeah.
I remember there was a amazing ice cream shop at the corner.
Yeah, I bet.
It was like a 2-3 minute walk from the apartment. My siblings and I were there like all the time, bro.
I watched like a TikTok, like one of the times I watched TikToks about Syria, and like they showed Damascus, and it was like up and thriving.
I love Damascus. If you
Yeah.
Google and see the images and everything,
Yeah.
it's amazing. The architecture, it's a lot of like there's a lot of history in the Middle East
Yeah.
because this is like where humans started, right?
Yeah.
So there's like a bunch of architectural historical sites to
I
look at.
bet. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that really made me hate ISIS, because
What?
I love history, they were destroying these sites.
It's
They were
ISIS.
like, they were
ISIS needs to be
going,
eliminated.
they were going out of their way. Like, even if the fightings is like in the Northeast, they'll send like a group of dudes
And just
to, yeah,
destroy it.
like historic,
That's crazy.
Christian sites, Muslim sites, everything.
Yeah.
Just they need to be taken out, bro. Who's,
There's in Damascus, you know, that's where the Umayyad Masjid is.
yeah,
And in Homs, there's another masjid named after Khalid ibn Walid.
he's from that region.
He's from the
Yeah.
The masjid, if you Google it, looks beautiful, man. It's
Yeah.
a beautiful masjid.
Yeah. So, you know, subhanAllah, Syria is definitely, if you look up Islamic lectures, it has a lot of history Islamically. Christians are there too, well established.
Masjid Umayyad, that used to be half church and half masjid
Really?
in the past.
Oh,
But
wow.
now it's a full masjid.
I remember, and somebody paid them. They bought it. They like
did?
they didn't
Yeah.
like they bought it. They
Uh-huh,
paid the
uh-huh.
Christians for that. So we talked about all these regional players: Hezbollah, Iran, backed HTS, CDF, the Syrian Defense Force. On an international level, what is the U.S. talking about? What does things look like from the U.S. perspective?
From the U.S. perspective, as far as I know right now, they have lifted the $10 million bounty on Ahmad al-Shara.
Al-Jani, or also known as
Yes. They lifted that. They didn't take HTS off the U.S. terror watch list yet.
yeah.
And they haven't lifted the sanctions yet. But inshallah, it'll happen in the future. The sanctions, they said they want to see. I think the U.S. likes what they see so far
Yeah.
and what al-Shara was saying as well. But they said they want to see more actions because talk is talk.
Yeah.
Without actions backing anything up, it's really pointless, right? So they want to see more actions first, and then they'll be ready to lift and do more of that stuff.
Yeah, but I also want to point out that it is 2025. It's January.
Yeah.
So
Whatever Biden says about Syria, bro, it's irrelevant. No one
Yeah.
cares about what he says, right?
the State Department, every federal agency is in like transition mode. They're maintaining what they can, but they're essentially transitioning to Trump presidency, Trump advisors, his cabinets, which we went over in our last episode. Check it out, episode 4. Yeah.
And you know, there was my mom sent me a reel about Trump talking about Syria.
Yeah.
I don't think it was recent. I think it was in the past. But he was basically saying like it was a beautiful country.
Yeah.
And this is where all his Middle Eastern friends were saying like this is the spot to travel to in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Like this is the vacation spot, right? And then he was like, I really want to see Syria go back to where it was. So I think it'll help, but
Yeah.
we'll see what happens.
I know Turkey lifted sanctions, and they had sanctions on because Assad was in
Yeah.
power. So they lifted sanctions. I know they sent, talking about Sanaya prison, they sent their search and rescue teams.
Did they?
Yeah,
That's
which are,
great,
which
actually.
are pretty experienced. And obviously Syria, they're basically emergency response. It's the white helmets. There's a phenomenal documentary during like 2011, 2013 of what the white helmets do. And, you know, they were basically digging kids out of rebels. Kind of the usual norm of search and rescue teams in the Middle East. But, yeah, check that out.
So Turkey also, they reopened like a train line
Yeah.
connecting Istanbul to Damascus as well.
Yeah. Is it
And
like a bullet train or something?
I don't think it's a bullet train. I think it's some type of train.
How long would
Yeah.
that take?
I don't know.
Like 3 hours? 4?
Maybe something like that.
I would not go on.
Turkey, I think it's like,
What if they have
I think it's about that time, honestly.
what if they have like bounty hunters like Redhead?
I hope
Red Dead
not.
Redemption.
Yeah.
HTS will take care of them.
Yeah.
They're doing the policing.
Yeah.
HTS.
And they also they reopened the embassy in Turkey as well.
A lot of countries did. Yeah, a lot of countries reopened the embassy. I think Qatar or one of the Emirati countries,
They
whatever.
did.
Yeah, they did as well. So you have all these Middle Eastern countries. I know there's dialogue going on with Western countries. The more UK has been a lot active with talking to it. So I want to touch on the elephant in the room,
The shaitan of the Middle East.
Iran, right? So Iran is definitely, they're in a box. Iran is in a box because Iran funded Bashar al-Assad. It funds Hezbollah. Now, where does Iran lose in this? It loses its supply route to Hezbollah, to Hamas. Because obviously now this territory, it's unsecure. HTS is using it. And it seems like HTS doesn't want any engagement in conflicts that are happening in this area. They don't want to fight with Israel. They actively said that, even though Israel attacked and took more of the Golan Heights. They did pull back a little bit. But
Netanyahu, when Assad fell, he came out with a video.
at the border,
Yeah,
yeah,
he said the extension into the Golan Heights. He said that's gonna be a temporary thing until they learn more about the new government.
yeah.
But let's see if it's actually temporary or not.
They had that buffer zone from like 1967,
Yeah.
and then they added a more buffer zone. He looked really goofy with his flak jacket, with his Kevlar. Like he needs to refit that, like or don't, whatever. But yeah. So Iran loses. It's because Iran does fund, even though Hamas is predominantly Sunni, they do fund them because it benefits Iran or because they attack Israel. And obviously, they fund Hezbollah as well. So they lose a main supply route, which Hezbollah needs. And then Iran has other players in the game in the Middle East. They have the Houthi rebels. The Houthi rebels, I'm sure a lot of people know, have been actively engaging shipping container ships in the Red Sea in response to Israel's aggression in Gaza and the West Bank. This kind of puts the Houthi rebels in a box as well, because recently the Houthis and Saudi have always been fighting. There's been a lot
It's been like the last 10 years, I believe.
Yes, and this is why Saudi Arabia doesn't like Iran, because Iran funds the Houthis. But recently, before October 7, there was talks of Saudi Arabia recognizing the Houthis as a government in Yemen. And Yemen it's been in famine for like 20, 30, a long time. There's a lot of suffering. You guys should read up on Yemen
And
as
the
well.
war that Saudi waged on Yemen made it even worse.
Yeah. So you have all these Shia or Iran-backed militias that are predominantly Shia in the Middle East. So it really brings into question, at least for me, for Western Shia Muslims, do they support Iran because Iran supposedly wants to help the people of Gaza? Or do you say, we don't support you, Iran, because you are also causing fitna in Muslim countries? We established that it's ISIS dash, whatever you want to call it, a separate entity. They killed a lot of Muslims. They were bad. They killed a lot of Muslims. They had hatred towards non-Muslims. So they're bad. We kind of ignore Iran, and it got a lot of hype recently because of their missile attacks towards Israel. Because right now, Israel it's like 50-50, but it's seen as the bad guy in that region right now. So do you support Iran, even though they're killing Muslims? They're actively causing problems in Muslim countries, in Syria, in Yemen, in Lebanon, although Hezbollah has a lot of support? Or do you say, hey, we don't support Iran, majority Muslims tend to go towards supporting Gaza?
While we're on the whole Shia versus Sunni thing, so a lot of Shias do support the regime as well. It's not like they support Iran only.
Mm-hmm.
They support the regime. A lot of them
What
do.
regime?
Assad's regime.
Okay, so they support the former.
Yeah, 100%. A lot of
Okay.
Shias are like that. I bet you a lot of like those comment sections you saw under those posts and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Bet you there were a lot of Shias under that saying that type of stuff, right?
Yeah, they
The
were
things that we
attacking
saw.
HCS. They were like, "Oh,
Right.
these are CIA backed,
Right.
Mossad, which is the Central Agents
Right.
Intelligent Agency of Israel."
And you know what Assad did under the regime? So he was trying. So for those who don't know, Assad is a Alawite,
Mm.
and that's a different sect in Shia sect, right? And I think his goal was to make Syria a majority Shia country instead
Yeah.
of Sunni. He made 2.2 million Shias a citizen of Syria under
And
his
where were they
regime.
from? They were from Iran.
Yes, different parts of the Middle
So,
East. It wasn't just Iran, but
okay.
scattered, right?
Yeah.
And what HTS did now was they revoked all 2.2 million.
They pulled a Trump,
Yeah.
low key.
Yeah, bro. Deport.
Yeah.
Bye.
They pulled a Trump, bro.
Yeah.
Jelani's like a Donald Trump in the
Yeah.
Middle East.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah. So there's really two nations in the Middle East right now that are causing the most problems. And it's not the U.S. It's not the empire, right? Because the empire, it's never wrong. It's Iran and Israel.
Yeah.
So, and they two are kind of two trains headed towards each other, right? They're going to have an active role. So it really, for Shia Western Muslims in the Europe, in the U.S., how do you react to Iran? It's actively, it's like supporting immigration and militias in Sunni countries. And then you have Israel, obviously the tensions between Israel and Hamas and in Gaza and also in Lebanon. They've kind of really won in Lebanon. And then they're in the Golan Heights region, but they're not really they're not attacking. It's just a buffer zone. So what is happening in Syria? It's definitely going to shape the region on a greater level.
1,000%.
You have to zoom out. But this is why we wanted to talk about this topic, because you have to zoom out. There's a lot of things. It really changed the game. Like that surprise attack, that blitzkrieg attack they did. It kind of reminded me of what the Taliban did. They kind of came in hard and fast. Those are another people, but that's on a separate topic. So make sure to keep up with what's going on in Syria.